Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm going to do a screen recording of Chapter 10 Social Studies. So you can follow along in your textbook. This is part 1. Early settlements. What made early settlers want to come to what is now Alberta? Last summer at Grand Marie and Grand Prairie's farm, we made a great fort. Grand Prairie helped us choose wood from the woodpile. We worked together to nail the boards to our corner posts. We made a roof using old sheets of plywood. My little sister and I really wanted to sleep outside in our new fort. The night was warm, so we were given permission. We spent a long time planning what we would need for our night in the fort. We got sleeping bags, blankets, and pillows. Grandma Marie let us choose some food supplies from the pantry. We decided to take chocolate granola bars and juice boxes and a shopping bag of other food. We made 6 or 7 trips from the house to the fort with all our supplies. My sister kept on wanting to tell me scary stories, so it was a long time before we got to sleep. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, we heard a loud cry that woke us up. "What's that?" my sister said, and then we heard the horrible cry again. We sensed a shape swooping above our heads and landing on the branches behind. We ran like crazy into the house. We're still not sure what made the racket, but we slept in the house the rest of the night. So that's just a story. I'm sure some of you can relate to something like that. Some of my classmates tried to guess what the noisy creature might have been. Others were much more interested in our fort. In class, we'd been learning about some of Alberta's fur trading forts. Just think, someone said, what it must have been like to start a fur trading fort. They would have needed much more than an old wood pile. Traders and people moving to settle in a place that didn't have Grandma Marie's pantry supplies either. Not only that, but we knew we could run into the house if we were scared. What must the new settlers have needed to feel safe? What would make them want to come to Alberta in the first place? Our teacher, Monsieur Fournier, said we would be learning about many people and events that helped set the stage for early settlement. For example, we would find out about forts built by the first police force in the West. We'd also discover how some communities got started and how increasing settlement affected the lives of the First Nations people and Métis people in Alberta. Imagine, a whole class discussion started because of one little tree fort adventure. So this map shows the forts and missions. Alberta forts and missions to 1880. So you can see the circles on the map show. The British monarchy. Last year I went with my parents to some garage sales. In a bin I found an old book called Our Gracious Queen. The book cover has an illustration of a young woman wearing a crown and a long cape. Who was it? My mom said this was Queen Victoria, the Queen of Canada from 1837 to 1901. She was the great-grandmother of Queen Elizabeth II, our current queen. Colonies. In the area now called Canada, there were once a number of French and British colonies. Colonies are groups of people who settle in a new area and keep connections with the country they came from. They are loyal to their first country and are protected by it. The British colonies were ruled by the British monarch, the king or queen. The Hudson's Bay Company had granted trading rights in Rupert's Land in 1670. Many employees were sent from Great Britain. They spoke English and brought many British customs. The organization and law systems of the colonies were similar to those in Britain and France. Queen Elizabeth II visited Alberta in 2005 to celebrate the province's centennial, its 100th birthday. Missionaries. How did missionaries start communities? Missionaries are people who are part of a religious group. They are sometimes sent to a specific area to teach people their beliefs. Various churches sent missionaries to the colonies. Many of the early missionaries lived among the Aboriginal people, learned their languages, and got to know them. The missionaries held church services and provided help to the people to people who were sick or in need. British missionaries. A number of missionaries came from Great Britain. Robert Rundle was sent from England to Fort Edmonton in 1840. He traveled around Alberta sharing his faith and religious teachings. He became friends with many Métis, Cree, and Nakota people. George McDougall was born in Ontario in 1821. As an adult, in 1862, he started a mission called Victoria, after the Queen. It was located about 10 kilometers south of Smoky Lake. The mission attracted about 150 English-speaking settlers from the Manitoba area. The people were Métis, Cree, and Scottish. The community was based on farming, buffalo hunting, and trading. When he was at the settlement, George McDougall served as a minister, teacher, and a doctor. He died during a buffalo hunt, but his son John continued his work. George McDougall, like Reverend Rundle, was a Methodist missionary. What challenges do you think missionaries faced? How did the British contribute to early settlements? French missionaries. The Oblates are a Roman Catholic religious order started in France in 1816. Many men who were Oblate missionaries came from France to what is now Canada. The site of the first Oblate mission in Alberta, Fort Ch.10, was built in 1851. The Oblate missionaries wanted to help Francophone settlers build communities. They wanted to teach the Catholic faith to others, such as Aboriginal people. At the new missions, the Oblates built churches, planted gardens, and started schools. The missionaries taught in French at their schools. A group of Oblate priests established the mission at Lac La Biche. Grey Nuns. The Grey Nuns were founded in 1737 in Montreal. The Oblates asked them to come to care for the sick and teach First Nations and Métis children. They arrived in Lac St. from Quebec in 1859. In missions such as Lac St. and St. Albert, the nuns taught reading, writing, and religion. The nuns at Lac St. learned the Cree language and wrote a Cree grammar book. The Grey Nuns arrived at the Lac La Biche mission in 1862. They built a school, a hospital, and an orphanage. As the number of missions in Alberta grew, the Grey Nuns started and ran many other schools and hospitals. So there's actually a hospital in Alberta called Grey Nuns Hospital. St. Albert. Our class did a study about Father Albert Lacombe. Father Lacombe started a new mission in St. Albert in 1861. He brought many Métis families with him from Lac St. The mission started by Father Jean-Baptiste Thibault. St. Albert was the largest Métis settlement in what is now Alberta for years. Many of the Métis people in Edmonton and surrounding areas today have their roots in St. Albert. We looked at a map of St. Albert in the 1800s. It was located along the Sturgeon River near Edmonton. The river must have been a source of water and a transportation route. So this is a map, and you can see the river. Monsieur Fournier asked us what we knew about the city. Janelle said she and her family often buy local fresh vegetables and honey from the St. Albert's Farmers Market. Cam told us about his visit to the Father Lacombe Chapel, the oldest building in Alberta. Tours at the chapel are given in French and English. Monsieur Fournier said we had already discovered clues from present-day St. Albert that reveals parts of its past. Then asked us several questions. What does the farmers market tell us about the land around St. Albert? What does the chapel tell us about how important the mission was? His questions really made us think. We wanted to know more about St. Albert's history. We started recording our questions. A timeline activity. We searched for answers to our questions about St. Albert. We used various sources, books, videos, the internet, and more. We shared information with each other. Next, we spread everything out on tables to organize it. We decided to put the materials in order. The events happened to create a timeline. Organizing ideas. Here are some images and notes Eric and his classmates prepared. Use the captions, what you know, and your predictions to put them in order. Hint, figure out and use the earliest year or time period in each entry. So I'm going to read through these events, and you can kind of after organize them in the order they would be on a timeline. So events from the first event to the last event, the earliest event. A. Father Albert Lacombe, a francophone, was born in 1827 and grew up on a farm near Saint Sulpice, Quebec. When he became a priest, he headed west. B. Pack horses were used to carry goods across the Sturgeon River to and from Fort Edmonton and the St. Albert Mission. In 1862, Father Lacombe decided the community needed a bridge. It was the first bridge in Canada west of the Great Lakes. The route that became the Carleton Trail was first used by the First Nations following game. It became the only land route between Fort Garry, now Winnipeg, and Fort Edmonton in the early 1800s. Many Francophone settlers traveled to St. Albert along the Carleton Trail in squeaky wooden Red River carts. D. In 1861, 20 Métis families came with Father Lacombe from Lac-Ste-Anne to start the new mission. He developed a river lot system based on the one used in Quebec. Land along the Sturgeon River was divided into long, narrow strips. The settlers built farmhouses and planted gardens. E. The arrival of the railway in 1890 and the offer of farmland brought a huge wave of new settlers to St. Albert. People came from Europe, Quebec, and the United States to start farms. F. Grey nuns from Lac-Ste-Anne moved to St. Albert in 1863. They started a hospital and a school. This photo shows a school and residence that was built in later years. G. In 1866, the Hudson's Bay Company built a fur trading post near the mission. Many Métis people traded furs, meat, and pemmican for supplies at the trading post. Métis life. In addition to Métis men's work as hunters, trappers, voyageurs, and farmers, the Métis women in Alberta often made a living making and selling pemmican to fur trading companies. Pemmican was ideal because it was easy to transport, very nutritious, and lasted a long time. As the buffalo herds began to disappear, some trading posts began to sell supplies and equipment to settlers arriving in the West. Many Métis people turned to farming. They learned skills such as planting gardens and raising livestock from the Oblate missionaries and nuns. Our buffalo hunts. I was 13 years old when I first joined in a buffalo hunt. We left Lac-Ste-Anne after the leaves were out on the poplar trees and our small fields and gardens were seeded or planted. All the families who wanted to join the hunt would prepare for the trip. I always used to accompany my mother on these trips. She was the medicine woman who set broken bones and knew how to use medicinal herbs. We from Lac-Ste-Anne would be the first to start, as we were the furthest north. The Métis of the St. Albert settlement would join us on the way. Usually there would be about 100 families going on the hunt. The buffalo was a very useful animal, for we ate the meat. We used its hide for ropes, shelter for our lodges, footwear, clothes, and bags. We of those days never could believe that the buffalo would ever be killed off, for there were thousands and thousands. The impact of diseases. Hospitals were badly needed when epidemics hit. Epidemics are outbreaks of diseases that spread to many people very quickly. Over time, it is possible for people to develop a better ability to fight against some illnesses. It is a natural way for our body to protect itself. Europeans had some resistance or the ability to fight against certain diseases. First Nations people did not because they had never been around such illnesses. Their bodies had not had a chance to build up any resistance. When First Nations people came into contact with Europeans, they caught some illnesses from them very easily. They were particularly affected by smallpox. This is a disease that causes high fever and blisters. Smallpox, measles, and whooping cough could be deadly. Medicines were not yet developed to fight these illnesses. Whole families and whole communities could die. In 1870, for example, there was a terrible smallpox epidemic in St. Albert. Smallpox epidemics killed thousands of First Nations people in Alberta. Historical records identify this Piikani count as cough disease. It is believed this may refer to the smallpox epidemic in 1870. So this is a picture from the Piikani winter count. It's a calendar they used.